Mixing can be tough, and while I've always mixed my songs myself, I wanted to do a little experiment. Is it worth paying somebody else to mix your songs? And what quality do you get at different budgets? I've set aside 3 price tiers for us to explore: $25, $75, and the extreme of $250. So after researching my Fiverr and Sound Better, these are the candidates I found. Glancing David's page, he seemed to be a strong value, offering 10 stems mixed for only $25. So I went ahead and started the conversation. It was great how quick and enthusiastically he wrote back, but there were 2 small issues. First, the tempo info was written into the files I sent, which caused David to have some difficulty loading the stems into Cubase. So I had to rebounce them without any embedded tempo information, and this is actually a great learning. I didn't quite know that having the safe tempo information enabled during exporting could impact how the audio files are interpreted by other DAWs. So from now on, I'll be sure to disable this option whenever I send something out for mixing or mastering. And second, David pointed out there was still a small amount of reverb on the guitar print, which indeed happened to be enabled within the guitar libraries, which I had overlooked. So I disabled the reverb, resent that over to him, and I finally placed the order where I asked him to use the song Crime by Gray and Scott as a reference track for the mix, and we were good to go. Now, only 1 day later, he already sent over a first version, so let's check that out.
We've been standing on the edge for so long, it's time to take the shot. Lip is the hardest, but so free and healing. We're shooting arrows, flying through the night. Who cares?
So I thought it sounded quite good for a first draft, but I did notice a few things. There were some bass stems missing from the track. I felt the transition to the pre-chorus sounded a bit harsh. The piano in the pre was a bit too loud. The verse 808 sounded a bit too prominent in the mix, and the chorus 808s were quite hard to hear when playing back on my phone. So I went ahead and sent over my feedback, and only 6 hours later, David already sent over a second version with a detailed message explaining what he did and what the implications were of adding more harmonics to the chorus 808s to make them more audible on low bass devices such as phone speakers.
We've been standing on the edge for so long, it's time to take the shot. Arrows flying through the night. Who cares? Arrows leave the past behind. All that I know.
This was definitely an improvement to the first version, but I still felt that the verse 808 sounded too heavy, while both the chorus drums and the outro guitar felt too compressed. So David went ahead and sent over the third version, in which he had tweaked the EQ on the verse 808s and the compression settings for the drums and the outro guitar.
We've been standing on the edge for so long, it's time to take the shot. Arrows flying through the night. Who cares? Arrows leave the past behind. All that.
Now, I was very happy with the result, and I think David did an amazing job, especially considering the price tag of only $25. So I wrote a review praising his communication, the quality of the mix, and his great attitude. Now, for our second, slightly more expensive price tier, I had found Kelly, who is top rated on Fiverr and has some cool clients. He offers a similar package of 10 stems, though at a price of $75. I reached out, and only a couple minutes later, Kelly wrote back that we were good to start, and he even offered a discount since I only wanted the track to be mixed, not mastered. I placed the order, again filled out the requirements, sharing the same reference track as before, and he answered right away that he would start mixing it shortly. And after 3 days, he sent over his first version.
We've been standing on the edge for so long, it's time to take the shot. Dreams buried within us,
I felt we were on the right path, but noticed that the vocals seemed to have a bit too much reverb. I also felt both the vocals and the drums sounded a bit too front and center compared to the rest of the elements in the mix, making the rest, and especially the guitar, sound faint in context of the mix, which definitely made me feel the instruments and vocals could be better integrated and glued together. I also felt the kick sounded a bit heavy, while the 808s sounded a bit thin in contrast. And the next day, Kelly sent over an update.
We've been standing on the edge for so long. It's time to take the shot. Free and arrows flying through the night. Who cares where we'll go? Yeah, it's our arrows flying through the night. Who cares where we'll go? Yeah, arrows leave the past behind. Oh, there.
I definitely felt this sounded more integrated, which was a great improvement, but the guitars now felt a little too present and aggressive, so I had offered the suggestion to do a hybrid between the V1 and V2 guitars. There was also some improvement on the vocal reverb, but I did notice some areas where it was still too prominent, and while the 808 sounded fuller and better now, it just felt like it sounded a bit too wide, like unnaturally wide. And only a few hours later, Kelly got back to me with version 3.
Feel the air, pull it up in our lungs now, 'cause you're just blind. Arrows flying through the night. Who can now take the chance? Time there's no going back. Arrows flying through the arrows, leave the past behind. All that I know.
It was definitely a huge step up, but there was still one section where I felt the reverb was too strong on the vocal, and I felt we could also still dial back a bit more on the 808's widening effect. There were also some sections where certain words of the vocal sounded a bit too quiet, like they were a little hard to hear clearly, which I timestamped so we could easily improve. Kelly then had one question regarding my notes to ensure that we addressed everything as best as possible in the last remaining revision, and I confirmed with him. So soon after, he shared the final version.
Sick of running round in circles so long. Time to speak life. Once we found the dreams buried within us. Arrows flying through the night. Who cares where we'll go?
Now, I felt Kelly tackled all of my remaining notes, so I approved the delivery and left my review praising the value of his gig. Now, finally, I wanted to see what value we could get by massively increasing our budget. So I went to Sound Better, which is a more upscale version of Fiverr, which, unlike Fiverr, only focuses on music-related freelance services. And this is where I found Mr. Mick, who is an engineer and producer whose credits include Beyoncé, Madonna, Taylor Swift, and Justin Timberlake, to name a few. So excitingly, I reached out, letting Mr. Mick know the details of what was needed. He got back to me later that day and was kind enough to offer a discount since we only needed a mix and not a master. So we eventually agreed on a price of $250. Then a week later, he sent over the first version.
We've been standing on the edge for so long. It's time to take the shot. Arrows flying through the night. Who cares where we'll go? Arrows flying through the night. Arrows leave the past behind. All that.
I must say it sounded quite good and well integrated, but I did notice some minor imperfections, like the opening cassette effect from the stems wasn't in there, some of the notes on the hi-hat stems seemed to be missing, and the kick sounded a bit slammed. Also, I noticed the version he sent was mastered, making it harder to accurately assess the mix alone. So along with my notes, I asked if he could send subsequent versions with mastering disabled. Mick was attentive to my notes and shared V2 a few days later.
Standing on the edge for so long. It's time to take the shot. Shooting arrows
At this point the kick sounded much better, but I felt the 808 sounded a bit too high-passed, like they were lacking some low end and warmth while they seemed too loud in other sections. I also noticed the guitar in the second chorus sounded a bit too quiet, while the hi-hats dominated that section in terms of volume. There were also guitar scratches being used as an atmospheric effect throughout the track as a background effect, which I felt sounded too prominent. And lastly, I felt one of the transitions could be a little less harsh. Now, based on this feedback, Meg offered for us to set up a Zoom session, which was nice, though I suggested that we try to address the remaining notes first, and that I was happy to join him should there be anything else. Then after the weekend, Meg sent me a new version.
Standing on the edge for so long, it's time to take the shot. Forget the beauty errors, flying through the night, running round in circles so long, down this beaten path. Errors, flying through the night. We're shooting arrows, leave the past behind.
Now I noticed straight away that the mix sounded quite different from the previous version. Like the vocals specifically sounded harsh in terms of top end as well as in the reverb and delay effects. And also the kick now seemed to lose prominence over the 808, and I noticed the guitar in the final chorus seemed to be dominated by the other elements. So based on this, Mick sent me version 4 the next day, which was closer to the version before V3.
Shooting arrows, flying through the night, running round in circles so long, down this beaten path. Yeah. Once we found the dreams buried within us.
Now after this I only had 2 more notes remaining. The kick sounded heavily integrated into the 808, where both low ends felt like they were competing against each other, which caused the kick to lack some punch and character. And I also noticed that the guitar scratches in our verses were quite loud, so I had let Mick know and kindly asked if he could complete it as soon as possible. And Mick then sent me version 5 that same day.
Shooting arrows, flying through the night, running round in circles so long, down this beaten path. Yeah. Shooting arrows, flying through the night. Who cares where?
And honestly, he nailed it. The kick was punching through, both the guitars themselves and scratches were sitting in the mix appropriately, and everything else just sounded great. So after 2 weeks, we reached a result that was ready for approval. Now, comparing all 3 results, the main question is, does price constitute quality? And is that relative to the communication, the attitude, and the result? At only $25, David offered exceptional value to the point of where his output easily exceeded the input of our cost. We worked with a very tight budget and had to group our instruments together for the package we chose, but we were able to achieve something magnificent with a very good and organic sounding mix, an amazing level of communication, really keeping us in the loop and explaining everything he did along the way. And all of that was done in only 2 days between the first order and the final delivery, which is just astonishing at this price point. We then graduated to something more expensive, which is what brought us to Kelly, who for $75 also delivered a great result. It took a few feedback rounds, but we were able to eventually meet at a happy medium of how I wanted the mix to sound. Of course, the question is, at 3 times the cost of David's mix, did we achieve a result that is 3 times as good? And to be honest, I'm not sure we did. I mean, Kelly's mix was still very good as well, and so was his communication. His delivery was slightly slower, taking about 6 days from first order to final delivery, but I still consider that a quick delivery given that we had several rounds of feedback. So overall, Kelly was able to deliver great value given his price point, but I'm not sure the value significantly exceeded that of David. Now, third and finally, our most expensive option with Meg took the longest to develop, both in time and the number of feedback rounds. However, the main question is, does Mick's $250 mix sound 10 times better than David's at $25? And to be honest, I don't entirely think so. Like, it does sound great and very polished, but I do not think it's worth 10 times that of David, you know? I mean, yes, Mick's result definitely sounded best compared to the other two, and you can tell from the result he is a great engineer, and that's probably why his credits include all these amazing A-list artists. But his result also took significantly more time to get there, taking about 2 weeks from first order to final delivery, which is definitely something worth considering. Now, overall, all three engineers delivered great sounding mixes. I'd say the $250 result ended up sounding most polished and clean. David's mix sounded most organic and full, while Kelly may have done a slightly better job at settling our low end than David's mix. However, given the price, I do think David was the best value in terms of quality delivered, level of communication, and speed of delivery. So the moral of the story is you can achieve great things irrespective of budget with the right attitude, communication, and attention. And that's it for today's video. Please let me know in the comments below who you think did the best job at mixing this song given the price point. Also, if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel to become part of our community of musicians and music lovers, and I can't wait to see you next time.